Great. So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am Fatma Bilkis. I'm the program director at the Technology for People Initiative at LUMS. Welcome to the 119th session of LUMS Live. We are going to be talking about the preservation of visual culture. And I have with me Dr. Nadra Khan, who is visiting faculty at the Mushtaq Ahmed Gurmani School of Humanities and Social Sciences. Dr. Nadra's primary area of research and interest is 19th century Sikh art and architecture, architectural ornament in the Punjab, but she also focuses on Mughal art and architecture from the 16th to 18th century. We also have Dr. Murtaza Taj with us, who is one of the faculty leads at TPI, and he earned his PhD and MSc degrees in electronic engineering and computer science from the Queen Mary University of London in the UK in 2009 and 2005. Currently, he's an assistant professor at LUMS in the School of Sciences and Engineering. So thank you both so much for joining and welcome to the session. So I think we'll just, get started. And if we could just, initially, if you could tell us a little bit about, what is visual culture? What's the history of visual culture and heritage in Pakistan? Dr. Nadra, I think we'll start with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I've been working with Murtaza for quite some time. So, we both have this concern about documenting, he's the master as far as, the technology of this thing goes. And I pitch in with my art history background. So this has been going on for a while. And it's lovely to be here today. Giving a history of this particular term is difficult. What I'll try to do is just try, kind of lay out some very basic understandings of how can we define this term, or how is it meaningful for us, or what does it mean for an ordinary, person who probably is not an art history student. Well, visual culture is something that we spot, that we are familiar with, that we are sensitive to, and we can see with our eyes. It is, directly related to vision. What do we see? And then when we see things, how do we interpret them? Because when we see things, we have the mental capacity to really understand as to, if this is a watch and this is a light bulb and so on and so forth. Generally, from the heritage perspective, when we talk about visual culture, it is about objects that are usually in the public domain. And the biggest and the most noticeable of these objects from the heritage perspective in the public domain are buildings. So buildings become the foremost or the most important or the most visible of these, the aspects of what we understand as the visual culture. And then, once we start talking about buildings, then everything else starts taking shape and moving into and around buildings, because human activities take place, all sorts of human activities take place in and around these buildings, and buildings are meant to serve a purpose. So it is utilitarian, and yet it is the highest form of art. And I'll stop here and allow Dr. Murtaza to join in, and then we can take the conversation forward.
Thank you, Fatma, for asking this very important question. And thank you, Dr. Nadra, for giving the very comprehensive overview. I think Dr. Nadra ने वैसे तो most of the चीजें cover कर दी हैं, but अगर मैं from a technical point of view visual culture को explain करने की कोशिश करूँ from the point of view of what we can consider as visual culture. So anything that you see from your eyes. Normally कहा जाता है कि 80% of childhood learning through vision होती है, and that is why visual aspect or the visual things are always being very important to express anything. In fact, a common saying है picture tells 1,000 words. So with visual cultures, culture or visual form of culture is basically history of a particular era, a particular time, written in terms of art, in terms of pictures, in terms of buildings, in terms of paintings, in terms of frescoes. And they are kind of a depiction of what's has been going on during that era or during that time. And from that point of view, when we talk about the history of visual culture, so in at least Dr. Nadra correctly pointed out, it is very difficult to define how it started, when it started. But अगर हम पाकिस्तानी context में देखते हैं तो we can say कि maybe 5,000 years ago, when we started to see these various forms of carvings and inscriptions appearing on the rock, there's probably where the visual culture of this area might have started, जिसके अंदर दो अहम हमें periods नजर आते हैं. एक बुद्धिस्ट एरा का जो 5,000 years onwards है, and afterwards इस्लामिक एरा के अंदर एक significant change in the visual culture है जिसे हम देखते हैं, और फिर उसके बाद में modifications हैं colonial era के अंदर, सिख era के अंदर, and so on.
Right. So, so in these different eras, what are some of the sort of, defining features of each era, or, sort of significant differences between those? And how is visual culture developed over time in Pakistan? Or in what we now call Pakistan? Sorry. Over.
Yeah, so I can give my understanding of it, but I think Dr. Nadra is a more authoritative person on that point. But what you see in the early period, like 5,000 years from now, this visual culture was mainly in the form of inscription or artwork on the rock. We call it petroglyphs, an inscription. And what those times, it was really talking about what kind of people were passing by this area, what were their activities, what kind of religion they were following. So it was a very initial form of a culture, which is just telling you the names at that point, some images of stupas, some images of ibexes, so kind of what they are doing, what they're bringing in. But as the time passed by, what you see is that this has evolved into over the time as the tools changed. So starting from rubbing a rock on the piece of rock, and you move on to more sophisticated tools in the Bronze Age and forward and beyond, we see that this visual culture has evolved in various forms. You see elaborated artwork, paintings, and then frescoes and these things coming up. And then as initially mentioned, that buildings are a very important piece of visual culture. So from the earlier time, we see that the visual culture is of this area is mainly stupas and monasteries, which are from the Buddhist time. And then later on in the Islamic era, we see mosques, we also see forts and tombs, and these kind of comprise the major visual culture when it comes to the architecture or the buildings. And I'd like Dr. Nadra to add more insight into this point.
Gee, thank you, Murtaza. So, Bilkis, interesting question, but let's first talk about why are these visual objects important and what do we do with them. So the first thing is that when you see an image, you try to decipher it, you try to read it. Some images resist this reading because you would only be able to read something that allows you to decode it, and in order to decode an image or a text, you have to have the requisite knowledge. उर्दू की तहरीर है तो आपको अलिफ बे आनी चाहिए, अंग्रेजी की है तो ABC से वाकफियत होगी तो आप पढ़ सकते हैं ना. So images are no less a repository of meaningful information. And then the one part of your question was, how far back do we go with them, and what kind of changes have kind of they incorporated in themselves up till probably the generally the recent times or our times. So from the art historical perspective, images की जो the most ancient form जो है या वो period है, उसे हम पैलियोलिथिक कहते हैं, जैसे डॉक्टर मुर्तजा की भी रिसर्च उसके ऊपर है. The rock carvings or images drawn on rocks or etched on rocks. So Paleolithic is old Stone Age. And then we have the Mesolithic, the Middle Stone Age, Neolithic, the New Stone Age, and so on and so forth. And फिर उसके बाद फिर Metal Ages आ जाती हैं, Bronze Age, and so on and so forth. And every age has its own vocabulary, its own system of visuals that makes it gives it its unique features. So हमारे यहाँ area that we have geographic boundaries of Pakistan, इसमें एक मेहरगढ़, एक बलोचिस्तान and surrounding areas, वो एक तरह से हम उसे ancient civilizations में उसका शुमार करते हैं, और उसमें जो हमें इसी तरह के images carved और etched मिलते हैं, they tell us about civilizations that used to inhabit these pieces of land and these areas, in ancient times. Now, as I said, a minute ago, what are these images and why were they, why did those human beings care to spend their energy on, let's say, carve a rock, or leave a set of markings on these rock surfaces? And these rock surfaces is the only thing that has survived over these millennia, because they may have done stuff or used other materials to express themselves, but they have perished. हो सकता है लकड़ी पे भी कुछ बनाया हो, लकड़ी नहीं बच सकी, stone बच गया, पत्थर बच गया, because of its of its ability to do that. So जब हम so between the image and the person whose eyes are encompassing that image is the action of reading it, of making meanings out of it. Because one thing is for certain, कि ये इंसानों का बनाया हुआ काम है, और इंसान अपने आप को किसी भी तरीके से, one way or the other, are trying to express themselves. With this gap between us and them that spans millennia, it is very hard for us today to really completely understand कि ये किस लिए बनाया गया था. So one relies on speculations, taking a lot of things into consideration. जैसे for example, तो generally हमें European Paleolithic art नजर आता है, उसमें wild animals की तस्वीरें बनाई हुई हैं इंसानों ने, चारकोल से भी बनाई हुई हैं, कहीं कहीं उसे एच भी किया हुआ है, generally mammoths or rhinoceros and so on and so forth. अब उसके बारे में बहुत सारी theories हैं. कुछ लोग समझते हैं कि these animals, human beings were hunter gatherers at that time. So in animals को वो probably cyclic वो जो था उनका, कि वो हर साल उनको मिलते रहें, उनका शिकार करें. कुछ कहते हैं magical reasons की वजह से बनाया, because human beings were probably not in a position to overpower these animals, और उनसे खौफ आता था, तो वो शायद कोई magical उनके ऊपर करने के लिए बनाते थे, and then they would have their magical act in order to gain some power over these wild beasts. So whatever the theory may be, these are definitely, one thing is something that everyone agrees on, that these images are modes of expression. And these modes of expression help us approach and understand individual and collective identity. It depends on who is approaching these images and with what perspective. तो ये किसी भी ज़माने के हों, पत्थर के ज़माने के हैं या लेटर पीरियड हैं या भी रिसेंट टाइम के हैं, इमेजेस हमें उन लोगों के बारे में बताते हैं जिन्होंने उन्हें क्रिएट किया है और जो उन्हें कंज्यूम करते हैं. आजकल हम एडवर्टाइजिंग की सूरत में या डिजिटल मीडिया की सूरत में, and right now what we're doing is, we have images on our screens. We can see each other, and there is an intent and there is an agency, at our individual ends, of trying to understand what these images mean and why are they important for us. I could go on, but let's, I'll move it back to you for you to ask your next question.
No, thank you. That's a really insightful response. And I mean, just to follow up on those lines, I think that's a really great explanation of perhaps why, visual culture is relevant to the people of that culture, right? But for civilizations that are now, long gone, why do you think it's important for us to preserve that visual culture? And how does that sort of tie into our identity today?
That reminds me of Erwin Panofsky, an art historian and someone who worked on the philosophy of images. He said that so he kind of gives us two terms. One is iconography, icons, and reading icons is iconography. The second one is iconology. So iconography is कि अगर आपके सामने एक पेंटिंग बनी हुई है, तस्वीर है या किसी पत्थर पे कोई इमेजेस हैं, कुछ भी है, you read them, you kind of decipher कि ये human figure है, looks like a male figure or a female figure, ये बच्चा है, ये घोड़ा है, ये बकरी है, ये इसके पीछे दरख्त है, ये फलां टाइप का दरख्त है, और अगर ये जो भी है प्याला है, they can be a variety of objects surrounded, given a certain, the artist's attempt would probably be trying to give a sense of time and space to that image. These human or animal figures are interacting with each other in a particular time and space, and they're kind of, having a conversation and doing something. And that is like a narrative, एक तरह की वो तस्वीरी कहानी है आपके सामने. अब आप उसे, it depends, do you want to read it from your own perspective? क्या उस भेड़ और बकरी को और उस आदमी और औरत को देखकर आपको गांव का अपना सीन याद आ जाता है, and you think that this is probably a representation of that? But what Panofsky tells us or asks us to do in order to really get a deeper understanding of what these visual narratives may mean is to analyze them, within the culture that produced it. So it asks you to do a contextual analysis of images. So you try to understand who were these people. So it opens up, different avenues of understanding, gathering information, historical information, to understand those cultures, and then try to make sense of what these objects may have meant for them. Were there symbolic significance attached to any one of these or all of these? Was this particular placement meaningful for them from a religious perspective, let's say, or a ritualistic perspective? So images then become a window into a culture far off from us or very close to us. ये भी हो सकता है कि हम पाकिस्तान में बैठकर किसी दूसरी सोसाइटी की इमेज को देखकर हम उनके बारे में मालूमात हासिल कर लें. We do not really necessarily need to be temporally disconnected or distanced from them. Spatial disconnect भी काफी होता है. Sometimes you find it hard to really understand कि किसी और के दूसरे मुल्क में या दूसरे इलाके में या दूसरी कम्युनिटी में वो certain चीजों के साथ at certain moments, why do they do certain things? So this visual culture then can explain all of these, can answer your questions, can give you examples of this is what they do when something like this happens. So visual cultures have the capacity to speak back to you, because this narrative business is very interesting. They may appear to be mute, images, but they definitely are not. They have, stories to tell us. It only depends on how receptive you are to these stories and how much you can catch them. I'll stop here.
So, Dr. Matsa, anything to add? Why preserve, heritage sites or visual culture, etc.? What's the need for this conservation?
Right. So, first, I agree with Dr. Nadra that they are window to the past. I want to emphasize more on this storytelling aspect. So, these days we have YouTube, we make video clips, we make, TikTok videos. But if you look at various form of artwork from the past, you see that maybe an entire story spreading around few months, week, or maybe year is basically encapsulated or enclosed into that one particular piece of art that we see today. So in a way, they are kind of method of expression of that time. And if you see these days, it might be very easy maybe to make a video clip. But at that time, an enormous amount of effort and energy has been put to, preserve that part of the event and then make it accessible for the days to come. Another aspect is that while one particular piece of visual culture may look isolated to you, but many of them are actually globally connected. You actually see from these what was the movement of people at that time, what was the commonality of people of different region at that time. So you might say visual culture of Pakistan, visual culture of this region, but actually it tells you how it is related to other countries. So in the present time, these are very different borders that we follow. They're very different restrictions. In the old time, it was very different, and so this interconnectivity is what you can get from these visual cultures just by looking at the correlation or the common items in them. And then like these days where you have two different versions of the story, they also tells us many different versions of the story, because of a same story carved on a rock will appear different. A same story maybe done in the form of small sculpture will be different, and the same story be narrated on a wall of a temple or a stupa or a monastery will be different. So it also tells us how information was flowing at that time. And then when we combine all this, this also tells us probably the hierarchy or the social system or the caste system that was present during those times. Who were the kings? Who were the followers? And what kind of activity they used to perform. So in a way, I sometimes call them as the history books of the past. And then, I mean, there's no need to emphasize on why do we want to learn and understand the history. History gives us lessons of what has been done in the past, what has been done in the past, which didn't work, and what should we do in the present time, to make most of it. So on one end, they are the identity of the local region. On the other hand, they have a lot of morals and stories for us to move forward. So one specific that at one occasion I was out on the site and someone asked me the same question: what is the need of preserving this old building? And then we said that look, the present modern day building lasts only 100 years. These buildings are standing there from thousands of years. What is so unique about their architecture and the mode of construction, that they are standing and our ones are not standing? So this is in the beginning we said that the architecture is a very important form of visual culture. So now if I move back a bit and take myself out of the human and animal figures and look at the architecture, then they tell us, okay, maybe we are doing something wrong in the construction these days in the modern time with all this technology. Those buildings are standing, our ones are not. So there's a lot to learn from them.
Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about the current efforts being undertaken in Pakistan to preserve to preserve these buildings and other kinds of visual cultural artifacts?
Lately, the interest around conservation, preservation, or focusing on artifacts or heritage has really been phenomenal. Generally there is awareness that these objects, or whether they are movable or immovable, tangible, intangible, both types of heritage are extremely important, because it has been going on in the Western world for a long time. Pakistan has been very slow about it, but luckily, there is this realization that we have a lot to offer to the world. We may not be able to compete with the rest of the world as far as maybe technology goes, and this is something that our Vice Chancellor said a few days ago, signing an MOU with the Department of Archaeology, that at least what we do have, we can actually develop it and present it to the rest of the world. And this is our heritage. We are so rich in our heritage. And by heritage, again, I do not only mean the tangible side of heritage. The intangible is equally rich. The poetry, the literature, languages, our songs, our and of course that also comes under poetry, but other forms of human expressions. Dance is one of that. Is something that the rest of the world would give anything to be a part where they can understand it, where they can learn from these. And I'll go back and repeat myself in saying that all human expressions carry something in terms of a meaningful way of educating us. There are ways of learning about cultures, learning about people, learning about their strengths and weaknesses that can help us, become better human beings. Whether they enhance our capabilities of creating something or understanding something. We have a lot that we can learn from others. And so these artistic expressions, and when I say artistic expressions, this does not really mean that it has to be an artist to leave an impression behind that we can then classify as artistic. All expressions, human expressions, to me, carry this intrinsic power of communicating, of where are these coming from and who do they represent. So जो भी इंसानों ने बनाया अपने पीछे छोड़ गए, and that also brings me and kind of हम अक्सर इस पे बात करते हैं, Dr. Mutsa I'm sure would also agree के what do we conserve and what do we leave out, what do we dismiss, and who decides? Conservation के लिए, why do we always pick up something which is grand and magnificent, and why do we allow other objects that may be of equal significance to just rot away? Because we somehow kind of use this hegemonic priority mechanism of deciding कि ये important है और ये important नहीं है. हालांकि what is kind of deemed to be not important may carry something extremely crucial for our understanding today. Environment ले लीजिए, how were these buildings built? What was the material that was used? Why were they using certain types of materials and not using certain other types? Why were there, बरामदा क्यों बनता था, उसके आगे छज्जा क्यों लगता था, मौसम की क्या requirement थी, and why have we kind of dismissed all of that? And what was the junction of our history? And let me just spell it out. Colonial period में हमने कितनी सारी अपनी indigenous activities and indigenous practices को हमने छोड़ दिया. And now when we get back to them and when we look at these buildings it is extremely crucially important for these objects or memories of the past to be preserved, because they keep on informing us of what we had, what got lost or forgotten. And if we care, and if we really have the desire, we can go back and reclaim them. अगर हम उसको प्रिजर्व चाहे डिजिटली करें या फिजिकली करें, किसी भी सूरत में, if we detach ourselves from our past, we will have no sense of identity. We would not know where we came from, and that is extremely important for every individual. आप अपने आप से हर कोई अगर पूछ के देखे कि how important is your past for you, how important is your childhood for you, because it is all coming to you now as your memories. So these sets of memories help you understand your present. They also help you kind of propel you into your future. No past would mean no present would mean no future. So this is the connection that I see in between myself and all forms of heritage that I happen to to kind of to think that I'm a custodian. We all are. हम अपने अपने जिस रीजन में हैं और जहाँ जहाँ हैं, हमसे पिछले आने वाले लोग हमारे लिए जो छोड़ गए हैं, these are repositories of information. ये इसमें बहुत मालूमात हैं और हम उसके कस्टोडियंस हैं. हमारा काम है हम उन्हें बचाएं और अगली generations तक लेकर आएं. So our agency is extremely important in that sense.
Right. And Dr. Murtaza, could you talk a little bit about these how technology can help us, achieve this preservation, and perhaps a little bit about the work that's being done on digital preservation in Pakistan, including, of course, your project and your collaborations with Dr. Nadra.
So before we dive into the technology aspect, पहला important question तो ये है कि जो conservation है या restoration है, हमारे पास क्या उसके resources हैं कि हम conservation और restoration कर सकते हैं. So time and again ये कहा जाता है कि जी पाकिस्तान बड़ा rich है cultural heritage में, हजारों साल पुरानी तहजीब है. And जब इसको conserve करने की बात आती है, restore करने की बात आती है, then these are very expensive projects that requires significant amount of expertise, significant amount of resources. And then if something has already been destroyed, then there is no way to even if you have resources and the skills, then you can't do it. So this is where the technology comes in. So technology ka, in general, if you see in everyday life, technology ka role assistance का. और पाकिस्तान में भी और दीगर ममालिक में भी हमारे यहाँ जो टेक्नोलॉजी का रोल है वो ये है कि नंबर 1 इज कि आप अगर कोई चीज अभी फिजिकली रेस्टोर नहीं की जा सकती है, कंजर्व नहीं की जा सकती, यू मेक अ डिजिटल कॉपी ऑफ इट सो दैट एटलीस्ट यू हैव अ डिजिटल कॉपी फॉर लुक इनटू इट इन फ्यूचर. जिसके बहुत सारे पर्पसेस हो सकता है उसको कंजर्व करना है, रेस्टोर करने के लिए डिजिटल कॉपी चाहिए. दूसरी चीज ये है कि कोई भी कंजर्वेशन या रेस्टोरेशन का काम जब भी शुरू होता है उसकी इन द मॉडर्न टाइम तक पहले उसकी डिजिटल फुटप्रिंट बनाते हैं. जो आर्किटेक्चरल कंजर्वेशन है या आर्किटेक्चर का जब भी कोई काम होता है, यू ऑलवेज स्टार्ट विद द ड्राइंग्स. एंड द ड्राइंग्स जिसके अंदर आपके पास एलिवेशन मैप्स हैं, फ्लोर प्लान्स, एंड दे टेल यू के what are the measurements, what kind of damage is being done, which walls are tilting, and this is how you plan your conservation. So having a digital copy has multiple purposes. If I summarize, to save it for future and then to use it for restoration. So when we talk about these two major purposes, so आपके पास technology point of view से then you have two different things. One is क्या वो टेक्नोलॉजी यूज करें जो किसी टिपिकली हम टर्म यूज करते हैं सर्वे ग्रेड एक्टिविटी में यूज हो सकते हैं. यानी आर्किटेक्ट उसे देख सकें, उसे यूज कर सकें और कहें कि हाँ इसके ऊपर वी कैन नाउ प्लान कि ये बिल्डिंग रेस्टोर कैसे होगी या कंजर्व कैसे होगी। और दूसरा टेक्नोलॉजी का एस्पेक्ट वो है जिसके जो जो यू नो जो आर्किटेक्चरल एस्पेक्ट के अलावा चीजें जैसे पेंटिंग्स हैं, फ्रेस्कोज हैं, जिसकी इमेजिंग ही इंपॉर्टेंट है। So if I come to my project or the activities that I have performed, we have kind of worked on in both of these directions. So the story kind of starts back in from 2013. जब हमने ये सोचना शुरू किया कि हम इमेजिंग और से क्या कर सकते हैं जिसका लोकल कम्युनिटी को फायदा, एंड वी रियलाइज दैट कि दिस इज वन वे टू प्रिजर्व द कल्चरल हेरिटेज before it gets destroyed, before the painting gets washed out, और इससे पहले कि बिल्डिंग कोलैप्स, आप उसकी एक मेजरमेंट लेके प्रिजर्व कर सकते हैं. And this is how it started. And then in the last 8 or 9 years, what have been able to achieve is number one, ये जो scientific methods हैं जिसके अंदर लेजर स्कैनिंग आ जाती है, रिफ्लेक्टिव ट्रांसमिटेंस इमेजिंग आ जाती है, या दूसरे जो तरीके हैं बिल्डिंग्स को डॉक्यूमेंट करने के, वो हमने लोकल कम्युनिटी में इंट्रोड्यूस किए हैं. और दूसरा काम हमने ये किया है कि हमने अवेयरनेस पैदा की है, विच मीन्स थ्रू वर्कशॉप्स एंड एंगेजिंग एक्टिविटीज. एज अ रिजल्ट इस वक्त एक वाइडर कम्युनिटी है जो एटलीस्ट ये अंडरस्टैंड करती है कि आप स्मार्टफोन के थ्रू भी बहुत सारी कंजर्वेशन कर सकते हैं, आप स्टोरीज बना सकते हैं, अवेयरनेस पैदा कर सकते हैं. द मोर द अवेयरनेस वुड बी द बेटर इट विल बी फॉर द. और दूसरे एंड पे ये है कि देयर आर देन आर्किटेक्चरल कंपनीज who now wants to use the latest technology to do their work even better and more efficiently. So this is kind of in a nutshell what we have been able to achieve while working on several sites of different nature across Pakistan.
Gee, and if I may add a little bit to this is, we've also taught a course together. Jo exactly intended to do what Dr. Mutza has just explained, sensitizing people into taking this into their own hands of digitally conserving whatever building, whatever object they may come across. So they do not really have to wait and call upon someone else to come and do it for them. Dr. Mutza designed very easy to follow course content as far as using computers and using laser scanners was concerned. And my bit was into introducing students how to understand and how to read these visual messages. So this was a combination of art history and computer science. So the idea again was to disseminate this idea, this understanding among our students, to pass this on to them, and then empower them into spreading the word further afield. Unfortunately, we were in the spring semester and COVID happened. So we were kind of halfway through our course, which was going wonderfully well. Our intention was introducing our students to one Mughal mosque and one Sikh period mosque, teach them how to use laser scanners, and then ask them to kind of do a bit of a comparison to try and understand how they can use these this type of a technological tools to really understand the sense of proportion, the sense of ornament, to not only to find differences but also to find similarities, commonalities as well. Dr. Murza, आप please इसमें कुछ add कीजिए.
Yeah, so I think आपने ये बड़ा अच्छा point raise किया about the course, because it connects well between starting awareness with small workshops and then making it a bigger platform. So what we have tried to do with that was this idea of digital heritage is basically from the beginning is a very cross-disciplinary idea. at one point you need people from social sciences, art historian. On the other hand, you need to have the understanding of the tools and technologies. And then a lot of people are scared about when they have to cross the boundary, or they have to move from their comfort zone to another area. And this is what we tried to did with that course. That, okay, we in one room bring both the sides of the story together, so that if one person enters the room or enters the lecture hall from the background of history or the social sciences, and he wants to learn technology, he can feel comfortable, and vice versa as well. So this is what that course helped us in doing it, both within LUMS and then even outside of the LUMS, when we have tried to did the same experiment, which means के सो आजकल के दौर में अगर कोई ये कहे कि मैं तो कंप्यूटर साइंटिस्ट नहीं है, मैं स्मार्टफोन यूज नहीं करूंगा, दैट डजंट मेक सेंस. सिमिलरली अगर आजकल के दौर में कोई हिस्टोरियन, कोई सोशल साइंटिस्ट, कोई आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट ये कहे कि मैं तो ड्रोन नहीं चलाना चाहता, मैं तो ये जो टूल्स हैं, ये स्कैनर्स हैं और कैमरास हैं, मैं यूज नहीं करना चाहता, दैट डजंट मेक सेंस. एंड दिस इज व्हाट वी एक्चुअली ट्राई टू कन्वे, दैट दीज टूल्स, टेक्नोलॉजीज आर देयर, दे आर टू असिस्ट यू. And the merger of these tools and technology with the history and with the information is what can take us to the next step, where we can actually do some benefit to all the cultural sites and the cultural objects within the country, and preserve them for a much longer period.
Bilkul right. And most of our students, Fatima, were students who had absolutely no understanding of these technological tools. But at the end of the course, each group made a website, and they picked out themes that fascinated them, in terms of trying to understand what each building's characteristic features are. One of them, one group's project I distinctly remember is they took up Mariam Zamani Mosque, and they, talked about women patronage. And then they highlighted, different flowers and different decorative elements that they thought, of course, corroborating it with historical references as well, of trying to, position the mosque as something that carries the expressions of a woman who is dedicating this mosque, who's the actual patron, Jahangir's mother, the position of the mosque right in front of the fort, how it may have been used, and so on and so forth. So these were, a lot of students worked on the Nankana Sahib Gurdwara as well, and they tried to understand the rituals that take place in that space, on certain occasions, and communicated everything very effectively. So their story building, reading images, putting these visual and text together with the help of these technological tools was something which was really fascinating for both of us as instructors, because this was this particular course gave us a sense of achievement, because it had communicated something that is so important in this day and age, of combining your skills and and sometimes not hesitating in getting into an uncomfortable zone for a while, doing your best, and then making the best of it. So it was a wonderful experience. And the second project that we've been working on is a website that we've designed. And this website showcases artifacts that belong to the Sikh period. Most of them belong to the Sikh period, although not all of them. And these artifacts are housed in the Lahore Fort's Sikh Gallery. So it's a kind of an assortment of a variety of objects, from paintings to utilitarian objects to to swords and daggers and so on and so forth. And the idea behind this website again is to disseminate knowledge about objects that may not be accessible to the general public, to make them available through this technology, and then give a historical background about each object, feature all its important aspects, and then leave it to the public, leave it to the students or anyone who's interested in reading about them, and then carrying out more research to get a better sense of again, going back to Panofsky's iconology, getting a better understanding of who were the cultures that created it, what did these objects mean to them, and what do they mean to us today.
Great. Dr. Nadra, what is the website, just for, people who want to, look it up?
The website is Sikh Virsa, SIKHVIRSA.org.pk.
Great. And Dr. Murtaza, could you tell us a little bit about the kinds of technologies that can be used for preservation, and how they work?
Right. So this is an interesting as well as a difficult question from the point of view to explain the technology in a way that is understandable for everyone. So I can start with, basically there are two kind of measurements that we want to do for the documentation. One is capturing the visual sense of it, like the colors, the appearances, and the other is to measure its architectural composition or measure its dimensions, measure its lengths, and these are the two main components. So one technology that we use is basically only doing distance measurement, taking lengths from one point to another. So it's kind of measuring all the points. Which is what we call as laser scanning. We have used this term laser scanning multiple times in this conversation. So to explain it to general audience, हम लेक्चर हॉल के दौरान वो अपना लेजर पॉइंटर यूज करते हैं. लेजर पॉइंटर सिंपली एक जगह लाइट पॉइंट कर देते हैं. अगर मैं एक जगह लाइट पॉइंट करूं और फिर दूसरी जगह लाइट पॉइंट करूं तो लेजर स्कैनर से वो मेजरमेंट ली जा सकती है. इसका मतलब ये कि किसी बिल्डिंग की हाइट क्या थी, उसके दरवाजे की हाइट क्या थी, उसकी जो विंडो थी उसकी साइज क्या थी, उसके अगर कोई आर्च थी तो उस आर्च का कर्वेचर क्या था, ये सारी मेजरमेंट्स हम लेजर स्कैनिंग के थ्रू करते हैं. अच्छा, दूसरी चीज जैसे मैंने आपसे कहा विजुअल या अपीयरेंस, वो इमेजिंग के थ्रू की जा सकती है. इमेजिंग में दो तरह की इमेजिंग है. एक ये कि आप जनरल फोटोग्राफ ले लें और उस फोटोग्राफ्स के थ्रू भी एडवांस मेजरमेंट्स की जा सकती हैं. बट एक दूसरी तरह की मेजरमेंट्स हैं जो हम यूज करते हैं अगर हमने किसी चीज का डिटेल्ड एनालिसिस करना. So which is called as reflectance transmittance imaging. So it's a very simple idea. अक्सर ये होता है कि हमें किसी चीज को देखना होता है तो हम उसको लाइट के अंदर डिफरेंट एंगल पे आगे पीछे करके देखते हैं तो हमें कोई चीज ज्यादा बेहतर नजर आ जाती है. अगर मुझे फॉर एग्जांपल अपने हाथ पे कोई चीज देखनी है तो आई टिल्ट इट इन मल्टीपल वेज एंड इट गिव्स मी एन आइडिया ऑफ टेल्स अस समथिंग मोर अबाउट फाइन डिटेल्स. दिस इज व्हाट इज रिफ्लेक्टिंग ट्रांसमिटिंग इमेजिंग इज. आप एक इमेज को मल्टीपल जगह से इल्यूमिनेट करते हैं और नॉर्मल तस्वीरें ले लेते हैं एंड दोस पिक्चर्स टेल यू अ लॉट. और ये एक आपने टेक्नोलॉजीज की बात की तो टेक्नोलॉजीज में आजकल जो सबसे कॉमन चीज है जो एक्चुअली एवरीवन कैन देन डू इट दीस डेज विद द स्मार्टफोन इज जिसे हम कहते हैं फोटोग्रामेट्री. सो आप मल्टीपल तस्वीरों को जोड़ के एक चीज का 3D मॉडल बना सकते हैं. सो हम अपनी लाइफ के अंदर हर रोज डिस्टेंस मेजरमेंट करते हैं दो आंखों से. तो दो आंखों की वजह से हमें डिस्टेंस का पता चलता है. देयर आर बहुत सी चीजें जिसकी वजह से आपको डिस्टेंस का पता चलता है, लेकिन दो आंखों का एक इम्पॉर्टेंट रोल दिया है. इसी तरह से दो तस्वीरों से हम बहुत सारी चीजें मेजरमेंट कर सकते हैं. और ये वो टेक्निक है जो इस वक्त मॉडर्न स्मार्टफोन्स में अवेलेबल है. आप अपना आईफोन उठाएं, कोई और हाई एंड फोन उठा लें, सैमसंग का या जो भी लेटेस्ट फोन आ रहे हैं, और उन सब में अब ये कैपेबिलिटी है कि आप तस्वीरें लेकर किसी भी चीज का 3D मॉडल बना के स्टोर कर सकते हैं. विच मीन्स कि अगर आपको बहुत एक्सपेंसिव सर्वे ग्रेड इक्विपमेंट नहीं भी है तो ये कुछ कॉमन टूल्स एंड टेक्नोलॉजीज हैं जिसके थ्रू आप खुद भी किसी भी साइट पे जाके उसकी initial documentation preservation कर सकते हैं. So basically rather than कि मैं बहुत sophisticated advanced tools and technologies की बात करूँ, actually I will focus on कि अगर एक कॉमन आदमी को किसी चीज को डॉक्यूमेंट करके जनरल पब्लिक तक पहुंचाना हो या इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी तक पहुंचाना हो, तो आप बहुत सी तस्वीरें लेके उसका 3D मॉडल बना सकते हैं जो आपका स्मार्टफोन खुद ही बना देगा. दूसरा, आप उसकी तस्वीरें लेके उसका पैनोरामा या वर्चुअल टूर्स बना देते हैं जो भी आजकल स्मार्टफोन में हो जाता है. And this is something which is very exciting these days. All this is doable just with a click of your camera on the smartphone.
Right. So for those people who are interested in undertaking this kind of enterprise, is there some sort of, set of like online resources that they could look into, just for those of us that are curious and want to contribute?
Yeah, there are tons of resources are मौजूद हैं. In fact, जो digital heritage या की जो term है जो आज से I think 10-15 साल पहले इनिशिएट हुई थी या उससे भी पहले, इस अम्ब्रेला के अंदर इस वक्त आपको बहुत सारी चीजें मिल जाती हैं. तो फॉर एग्जांपल जो हमारी अपनी वेबसाइट है heritage360.pk, उस पर आपको रिसोर्सेज मिल जाएंगे. अदरवाइज देयर इज अनदर सोर्स विच इज कल्चरल हेरिटेज इंस्टीट्यूट, उस पर आपको रिसोर्सेज मिल जाएंगे. बट अदरवाइज इन जनरल भी जितनी मैंने टर्म्स यूज करी जैसे फोटोग्रामेट्री या 3D मॉडलिंग या वर्चुअल टूर, you hit it on the Google and there are tutorials out there and there are free software out there. So yes, there are tons of resources that anyone can use.
Great. So I just to sort of move us towards a neat conclusion to the seminar. What's next? What are the new exciting frontiers in this work, and any perhaps interesting projects that you're looking to undertake in the near future?
Okay, so at the moment what I see is there's a lot of momentum going on, and the reason there's a lot of momentum in this area is because recently, for the purpose of economic benefit, tourism or religious tourism or culture tourism के अंदर बहुत ज़्यादा emphasis है, because it can generate revenues. और इसी डायरेक्शन के अंदर if you look around, so we see के there's an interest of the general public, there's interest of the government, there's interest of the local community as well, जो पहले उन ऑब्जेक्ट्स को शायद इतनी इंपॉर्टेंस नहीं दे रही थी, अब उनको पता है कि इसके थ्रू इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी जनरेट होगी. So this is something which I think is very important, which is coming up, where we all can contribute in terms of spreading more awareness. Then the other part of your question was the interesting upcoming projects that we are looking at. So one of the important projects that we are doing right now, and we want to keep on working for next couple of years, is when you have man-made interventions in the area, then there are threats to the cultural assets, but then there are cases where you can't do much. So there is this activity regarding construction of the dam going on, and where it is expected that some of the assets, in fact a significant collection of them, may get submerged in the flood basin. So this is where our current project is going on, where we are documenting the rock carvings and inscription within the flood basin of the dam in the Gilgit-Baltistan region. And one of the aspects of this activity is that with this activity we want to create an online repository of these assets, which can then be accessible to the international community who is interested in working, but they can't visit because of in the beginning there were COVID-related challenges and there are other travel restrictions. So one of the important aspects that we are working on is how can we make it accessible to anyone in the world, and this is where the current focus is. Yes, Dr. Nadra, please, you can add.
Gee, thank you so much. I think we're kind of running out of time now. I'll just take a couple of minutes and urge young people or anyone who's interested in documenting any of these stories that are scattered all around us, embedded and woven into objects that you have, or you see, or you find. Pay attention to them. और तस्वीरों को या किसी भी किस्म के images को try to read them, try to understand them from your perspective and from the perspective of people who created them, and this will give you an endless list of stories. And as Dr. Murtaza has already said, there is this hype about tourism, there is this possibility of Pakistan getting a lot of tourists and their attention. And if you are there, if you're ready to share your stories about, let's say, monuments that are significant, from the religious perspective to them. For example, you come across, Buddhist pilgrims or tourists who may be here for religious tourism and, other touristic aspirations as well. Or Sikh yatri bahut aate hain yahan par. हिंदू मजहब के भी बहुत से हमारे पास टेम्पल्स हैं, जैन टेम्पल्स भी बहुत से हैं, and so on and so forth, and the list is long. The very first thing is, if we start taking interest in them, and if we try and understand what this visual culture offers us in terms of an understanding of those people who made them, and their significance for others who come from outside Pakistan and who would, really be grateful to you if, you're the one who's becoming a bridge between them and, heritage sites that lie within our country. So do that. Use your smartphones. Study history. Look at images. Or agar kisi ko bahut, if you really want to pick up texts that would help you in understanding the power of these images. You see, images की अपनी एक ताकत है, वो आपको अपनी तरफ attract करती हैं. और फिर, one of my favorite kind of authors is J.T. Mitchell. उनके बहुत से articles हैं, उनकी YouTube पे ऊपर बहुत से आपको videos भी मिल जाएंगी, उनकी talks की. The way that he frames this this activity of viewing and understanding images is fascinating. वो ये कहते हैं कि images की power तो है हमारे ऊपर, मगर images की अपनी कुछ desires भी होती हैं, और देखने वाले को उन desires को भी समझना चाहिए. और फिर जो आपका images के साथ interaction होता है, वो एक और तरह का होता है. So I'd really urge younger people who are interested in any of this to read about the power of these images, how they can communicate information to you, what you can do with this information, what, the way that you can use what Dr. Murtaza has, very clearly kind of stated. Just use your phones. Even if you don't have a smartphone, just use your ordinary phone or a simple camera. Or if you don't have that, just sit down and sketch it. And if you don't know how to sketch it, learn how to do that. So there are ways of engaging with, the visual culture that we have around us. And, the one of the last things that I really want to say is take pride in them, own them, and safeguard them for posterity. हम बाद में आने वालों के लिए उन्हें बचा के रखिए.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much, Dr. Nadra and Dr. Murtaza, for taking the time to do this. And thank you to our audience for joining. I have been Fatma Bilkis from TPI at LUMS. And just before we sign off, it takes a lot of work to put these together each week. So our thanks to Marwa Sheikh and Ali Naqvi, who've been providing support in organizing this, and my thanks to my team who put all of this together. Sharmeen and Hassan, thank you very much. They came up with all these excellent questions and made this possible. So thank you, everyone. Have a great week, and Good day. Tafis.